Okay, great. That can also share this after the session. So let me just stop my video so that we can just concentrate on my presentation slides. Please, let's kindly confirm. I believe you can hear me clearly and you can see my presentation. So they said I have 45 minutes. I hope I'm correct. Right? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Let me check that. How about now? Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, all right. Maybe network or something. Okay, but I believe you can all hear me clearly now. So I said we're going to put this in recording, right, so that we can also check this after the presentation. So let's get started. So please, you can always send me a chat in the through the chat box. So in case my mic is not working perfectly or something, right? Okay, so I believe you can hear me clearly. Let me be sure, 100%. Right. So project finance modeling. Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Chiji. Okay. Project finance modeling, cost modeling for a typical construction project, more like infrastructure model build. Before we get started, let's take a look at some of the content that we'll be discussing. Let's first discuss what we call components of a model. Component of a model. And explain things. I like breaking it down. So when you hear anything like components, basically mean what are the one or two things that you need to put together. What is this guide? What is this thing that we call model? So we take a look at that and also take a look at different kinds of model that we also have. And then will now lead us to be having a discussion around what we call project finance when it comes to infrastructure modeling, infrastructure projects. We kind of have that under project finance. We'll have a discussion around that. And we'll now take a look at the typical structure of infrastructure based model. It's a practical example, right? So we have a limited time, but we try as much as possible to cover what we can as well. And I can also share some other resources with us after that. So, component of the model. So when the way I kind of make things, right? I like making things down very well. Whenever you hear anything like component, basically mean what are one or two things that we must add, we must put together before we call this thing this name. For example, if I ask us, what are the components of a car? I'm quite sure you're going to tell me that before you call something a car, you must have the tire, right? You must have the steering, you must have the mirror, you must have the bonnet, the whole thing, the four tires. That's what are the components of a family. Definitely, you must have the father, you must have their the mother, the children, the extended family, the neighbor turned to family, and just things like that, right? So when it comes to model, the same thing also apply. Before you call something a model, you must entail just three things. Trust me, irrespective of the type of model you want to call it. And the three things are what? The first one is what we call input, data, assumptions. At times we even call it drivers. Then the second one is what we call calculations, where you do all your workings, you do all your magic. And the third one is what we call output. So now the output also determines the kind of model that we build. Let me even give us a good example, because one question I would have loved to ask us is this: how many models have you built? So if I ask us that, how many models have you built? I'm quite sure I'm going to get response like zero, not built any models and the whole thing. But I can tell you that you've actually built thousands, in fact, millions of models. Let's take a look at a very good example of what we call a model. In fact, this world that we are living is a model. Everything in this world, right, was actually built around model. So let's assume I type one here, I type two in another cell. But let me even follow it so that we know. I'm going to call this input, and I'm also going to call this input. Let me put this one here. Now come to another cell, and I will type equal to the cell that contain one. plus the cell that contain 2, enter. You know that this is a model. Why? Can you look at the component that we mentioned? But one is because I have inputs, which is this one. I have another input, which is this 2. Then I have my calculation, which is 1 plus 2, and I have my output. Now, what makes it a model is because it is dynamic. I can always come back here, change my 1 to 5, and my output automatically updates and adjusts. Change this 2 to 6 to 4. You see, it just affects the output automatically. And basically, that's what we call a model. Back then in our school days, they would tell us y is equal to a plus b, but they can even add x. And then they will tell us, oh, one is independent, the other one is independent. Because this is what we call a model. A plus b, both of them are independent because they can be changed. And whatsoever change that happen to both of them will always affect the result of the y. And that's what we call a model. Taking it a little bit further, let's now try to understand this concept of financial model. As I said, you've understood the concept of, oh, this is what they call model. Anytime you see input, you're saying you go to Excel, you type, oh, this man will be collecting this salary of 100,000, right? And you'll be charging him a 5% that goes straight to maybe one tax or something. So that 5% multiplied by that 100,000 will give you one output. That is a model. So you can always go back, change the person's salary, change the percent as well, which also affect the output. Now, concept of modeling, we have lots of definition when it comes to modeling. But to keep things easy, it's just we estimating the future performance, the future expectation of a project or a business by taking account all relevant factors, different drivers, growth, macroeconomic assumptions, different things that can affect the output of the project. So we are here today, right? And we want to take a look at what will happen in the future so that we can make that decision today. Now, accountants, we are more focused we are more historically focused. When you see an accountant's report, you always see as at. It must be like the day before now or minutes before now. You can never see an accountant's report that will tell you about the future. Finance is more focused on the future part, and finance is adjustable to risk, and that is where financial modeling comes into play. And we have different segments, different sections when it comes to financial modeling. The first one is what we call a typical startup model, something that has no historical financials, they don't have anything, but they want to start a business today, and you need to build a model to be able to evaluate, to also value the business, to check, if we invest this amount in this business, what will be the expected return? Is this business worthwhile or not? For a typical startup. The second one is we build corporate finance models as well. So when you go online and they're telling you that, oh, this company is being valued as this social amount, the stock price is valued at this amount, it simply means someone has actually built a model to be able to determine that. To take a look at, oh, this is the business, they have historical financials. So someone will now take that historical financials, look at the trend of the business performance, and use it to forecast what the future will be. And based on that, they discount it to a watch today and tell you, oh, this business is worth this. If you invest this, if you buy this business share, you are definitely going to get this. The third one is what we now call our project finance model. Now, you know, startup, a typical startup, oh, I want to start a business, you do your business plan, you start your business. Corporates, they've already started, they've been in operation, they have historical financial that you can use. But for a project finance, you have nothing. In fact, it is independent. It is independent such that the liability is also in the project, and you cannot hold anybody responsible because it's just like a single project. And that is what we are going to take a look at. Then the other one is what we call stochastic model. This is more like a statistics modeling part. Now, let's get started with the first one, which we call a concept of my project finance. Project finance is very, very sweet, right? And let me give you a good definition of project finance. Project finance is just a financing mechanism whereby a lender or the people that have committed their investments relies on the cash flow from the project asset. In other words, it is a special project vehicle. Let's assume Dangote decide that, oh, tomorrow we want to set up another plant somewhere. Now, and then tell you that that would be a special project on its own. It means something that happens to that project, that or his company can never. So let's say Dangote, right, want to establish, maybe they just want to start up maybe a new production plant somewhere. And they decided that, oh, this production plant I want to start, we're going to treat it as a special project vehicle. So what does that mean? That means, irrespective of anything to that project, Dangote and his company will never be held responsible because of what provider of the capital, something we call a recourse. Right? Provider of capital have full or limited recourse to the project cash flow. That what is a special project vehicle. The asset is only liable to meet up necessary obligation without having anything to do with, as I said, Dangote or his business. Which means it is a non or limited recourse. It is a very risky project because you only depend on the project assets to be able to settle necessary financial obligations. This is applicable in several sectors: power, infrastructure, oil and gas, right, as of manufacturing, distribution, telecommunication as well. Now, it has a maximized leverage. Means it most times it is being funded using loan, because the loan is being repaid from the project cash flow, which means the project assets are used as a collateral, right? And that's why you will definitely, taking a look at that, you know that there will definitely be lots of credit support, that there will be a lot of guarantee needed, right? Warranties, covenants, and also they are high leverage, which means they are off balance sheet treatment because the project is standing on its own. Right? It has nothing to do with, hey, well, let's take Dangote Flowers financials and use it as no. Project stands on its own. It is highly leveraged. At most times, you can say as 85% debt used as financing. Also, it is very capital intensive. Now, before we dive into the project finance, I'm quite sure you at least you see that you are getting the understanding already. So let me even bring it closer. Let's assume you went to get a car. You're into a transporting business. You have a company, but you went ahead to get a car, maybe a truck. While you were getting the truck, you told people that want to give you the money to buy the truck that, hey, this truck, I'll buy it, and I'll be using it to run this business operations. And it is the cash that we generate from this that we are going to use in settling the repayment. So which means if that truck failed to generate enough cash to meet up the liability, you cannot hold the owner responsible because it is a special project. Let's look at the typical flow of a business. You want to start a business today? I'm quite sure you know the first thing you need to do is say, let me do a visibility study, let me do some market research, economic factor, right? Be able to understand, oh, is there a market for this, my business? After that, you then go ahead and you try and get your funding. Maybe through loans, through equity, right? You also consider the cost of funding. Then after that, then tell us how you plan to make use of the funds, getting some operating assets, equipment, working cash, running of the business. And then after that, you start your business operation. You list your revenue, you list necessary costs, and after that, you have your profitability, which kind of measure the efficiency management of the resources that have been committed, and then you have your cash at the end. Now, this is a typical flow of a corporate establishment, most business establishments, for a typical business or a typical project. But when it comes to project finance, it's a little dynamic. Now, this one, if anything happen in this type of a business structure, you can always hold the owners responsible. But this is a typical business flow. But for project finance, is a little bit dynamic. Now let's take a look at the structure of a typical project finance. We said project finance is set, the project is set as a special project vehicle, standing on its own. And we said the project will generate cash. It is the cash that's being generated from it that will be used to settle all obligations. Normal business, organization, you can generate cash from many other places to settle it. But for project finance, SPV, the project actually generates the cash to settle its liability. So, in other words, I'm quite sure you try to see that, okay, for people to even commit their investment, there are a lot of things that needs to be established. Now, first thing is this: you need to be able to establish what we call EPC, so engineering, procurement, and construction contract. So it don't just come, as I said, it's very capital intensive. So you always see them measuring billions, 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 billions of dollars. At times, a typical project can even take close to 2 or 3 years for you to even develop the project. Now, during during that stage, right, the project has already started and is being financed by some people. So which means you must establish necessary contracts. We call it EPC contract, right? Know your operating costs, even during that construction period. Then after that, you don't just immediately you establish, oh, these are the costs and everything. Then you now need to also establish your off-takers. We call them off-takers. So which means we are saying by the time we complete this project, we already have a customer ready. Just simple term. So we call them off-takers. That, oh, immediately we want to build this plant. So by the time we build this plant, maybe it will be producing this also number of oil, or if it is energy, also number of kilowatts, and you would have gotten your customers. We call them off-takers, which means people that are ready. Immediately that plant starts producing, those will be the suppliers. So which means that revenue is guaranteed already. Then after that, you now need to also establish your supplier contractor. People that will be supplying you raw material. For example, if it's a manufacturing firm, definitely you need that will supply you. If it's for typical oil and gas, then you need to establish both your upstream and your downstream. You need to establish that so that people that are committing the financing, they are also 100% sure. Then after that, you also need to consider equity financing, the sponsor percent, which is more like a guarantee that, oh, yes, you know, this is an SPV. So if the project needs like 100 billions, that means what percent are the sponsor, which are more like the owner of the project itself, how much are they committing into it? If they have other investors, they also need to establish that. Once they have these three sections ready, that is when you now proceed into getting your other part, which is the debt part. You now need to identify your lenders. 10% financed by sponsor equity and other investors. Out of 100 billion, you take 10% of it. Then the remaining, which is the 80%, will now be funded by lenders. Is debt. You can have multiple lenders. As I said, So as I mentioned, right, you can now have multiple lenders that want to commit their financing to the project. That is after you've what this other part of the section. Now, as I said, sometimes construction period might take you like 2 years. Some can go as long as 3 years. That means they will not release the funds at once. And even after releasing the funds, they will always keep it in one account. They also safeguards the borrowers. Maybe in case the project failed to complete its construction, they can always take back their money. So we have different accounts that we use. We call them collection amount, which means that's the account the lender will transfer the money to. Operations account, debt service reserve account. This is very, very important, right? And some other reserve accounts that go straight from there. Then money goes straight, so they also sign the necessary financing agreement. Right? You could also have some other lenders that just kind of serve as a guarantor. That what if the business failed to meet up its financial obligations, some other financing can come in form of other funding to meet up. So you have different agreements to be able to safeguard the lenders and their financing. Right? So once you have this, have your drawdown, you can always draw from the reserve account, meet up all necessary obligation during that period, and after that, you have the project. You can start receiving money from your off-takers that you've signed that agreement with. So project finance is a little bit dynamic, right? Because it's a special project vehicle that is standing on its own. So which means everything must be established before you even get started with the project. Element of a project finance, we have what we call timing. Timing is very, very important because once you start project, we have what we call finance period. So those are the periods you do your documentation, trying to meet up with your off-takers, like customers, right? Establishing necessary costs. So during that documentation period, we believe the project has started already. And once you agree the whole thing, then you have your financial period end. Right? You have your financial period. You've gotten the funds. The next thing is for you to do what? Is to start the construction. To start the construction of the project. Start the construction, you could also have some delay periods. All this usually factor it. Okay, all right. Welcome back. Okay, welcome back. I hope you can hear me now. I can still share, can still see my screen. Okay, all right, all right. So as I said, we have different timing. So immediately you start documentation of projects. We believe the project has started. Right? You're trying to establish different contracts with your off-takers, right? Your cost EPC contract, your suppliers, and everything. We believe the projects are started. Then right? Construction period pressure. So we also try to do what we call debt sizing, drawdown, and covenant. Able to show that yes, this is more like the minimum, the maximum capacity of this project based on this forecasted cash flow. To be able to say that, hey, yes, this is more like the maximum depth that this project can take. In other words, which is this project is more of cash focus. So you need to be well detailed when it comes to your revenue, your cost management, your cash flow available for debt service, and your debt service coverage ratios as well. Then we have concept called cash flow waterfall, which means if the project generates more cash than expected, we then use it to settle our financial obligations, and also as much as possible to keep what we call a reserve account. Right? Now let's take a look at a typical practical demo. Right, so I also shared that with us so that we can take a look at that. We kind of have a limited time, right? But let's so because of that, well, the limited time is not enough for us to just kind of build a simple model together. What I've done is I decided to share a simple model that was built for a project, right? I decided to share that with us. In things, just to simplify it, this is a project, project finance that was built. Let me just run you through from the input part. Remember when I mentioned that we usually start from development phase. So we're saying, oh, we're starting this project today. We believe it has started. Now, sometimes take like 3 or 4 months. You try to establish to get all your documentation right. With different financing institution, right? They will request for this, request for that, request for that documentation. So, for example, this project we assume is going to start January 2023. Now, and we expect, doing the documentation between different financial institutions, and the whole thing should be able to take them 3 months. Because these are very, very important things. Then you have what we call your financial groups. You can see, want to start this project. We believe it's going to start today, right? Start at different financing institutions, different investors to be able to get that funds. And maybe that will just cost 3 months. It take us 5 months, then you put your month there. But for this, we just set it as 3 months. At times it could be delayed. So which means you also need to be able to factor different scenarios, different things that could happen that can delay the cash period. And the whole thing is also the concept of time value of money. So which means if I'm telling you that, hey, today let me give you 5,000. Okay, let me give you 5 million. Or wait till the next 2 years and let me give you 6 million. Which would you prefer? So I'm saying today let me give you 5 million, or wait till the next after next 2 years, I will give you 6 million. I'm quite sure you prefer to get that 5 million today. Because of what? Those 5 millions will be able to buy today. Maybe it might cost times 2 of it in the next 2 years. You understand what the inflation thing is saying in our country. So those kind of things we try to incorporate it into the model. After that, you've gotten your funding. Then the next thing is you go straight and you start building. You start necessary agreements with your engineering, procurement, right? Construction cost and everything. Maybe they will be shifting some of this material from overseas. That means the construction is starting immediately. So they will not just give you that cash, they will put it in one reserve account that you can always withdraw from. It's not as if as I said, it's a special project vehicle. So it's not as if because Dangote wants to embark on this special project vehicle, this construction or this infrastructure project, does not mean they will send the money to Dangote company accounts. No, it will be in one reserve account that the project can always withdraw. So it's not as if they will send it to the account, then they will be using the money to do something else. No, because they're also monitoring that. So this one, we're saying, maybe the project will take us 12 months to complete the construction of the plant, setting up the whole place. then you have that. At times, you could also have some delay period. Maybe during the model, they said, oh, it's going to cost us 12 months. Then your lender will be like, oh, what if some things happen, this and that, and it takes you close to 15 months? You need to factor it into the model because it will have effects on the project's cash. Right? Now, once you are done with your construction, as I said, you could also have some delay period, so you also need to consider all those things. Then you get started with your operation period. Oh, operation will start in this also period, maybe after the construction, and there's no delay, we can start the operation. And for how long will the project run? So this one is saying, no, it's going to run for 10 years. Right? Then that's more like the time. Then you also recognize some other constant assumptions, some general assumption. For example, your model period, you could build your own model monthly, you could build it quarterly, right? You could even build it semi-annually. It depends on you, or you build it yearly. But for this model, we decided to keep it monthly. Then period in a month, 12 months are typical normal 12 months in a year. We have our days in the period, 365 days, and we have just provision for tax. So at times, as I said, this is just a concise one. At times, you need to be able to list out and be well detailed with your tax. You need to recognize capital allowance, right? Initial capital allowance, annual capital allowance, your maximum capital allowance allowable, right? Necessary if it's for typical, if it's for oil and gas, you need to be able to recognize all those royalty tax, right? Tax that goes straight to the government. You must also include it because those are things that will affect the project's cash flow. So you must include everything. It's always well detailed. Be able to say, oh, at the end, this will be the cash that will be available at the end of the year. During the project, right? During the project, definitely the project you also share, which means you need to recognize that as well. Also factors on maintainable, some replacement costs. Now, how do you know that? Now you list how you plan to spend the funds. So now, this is just like a concise one. Okay, so set my mic is failing. Okay, so can you hear me now? Okay, all right. So then you now need to state how you plan to use the funds. Now, as I said, immediately this is what we want to do, the SPV. Then you go ahead and establish all your necessary costs because it is the cost that will drive the funds that you need. For a typical normal business, you say, oh, need 5 million. Oh, and this is how we plan to spend the 5 million. But for project finance, it's not like that. Project finance is you list all your costs, then you also consider other costs, all the financing institutes that will help you in getting the funding, the charges, the fee, the management fee, the advisor fee, and the whole thing must always be part of this your fund that you need. Sometimes the advisor will tell you, or the institute that kind of help you with getting different lenders. Tell you, we are going to charge you 5% of the total investment. So which means that percent that they've charged will also form part of the project cost. Now, once you do that, as I said, because we always build it in phases. So which means you must be able to list how you plan to use the funds as well. For example, this project is saying, oh, for our factory and plant, it's going to cost us 1.7 billion. Now, as I said, it's not as if the financier will just give you the whole money at once. No. They want to see how do you plan to spend this. Timing is very, very important. Or maybe in the first quarter, they're going to spend maybe 30% of that money that we've listed. Which means, as at that time, that is the amount you can draw from the reserve. During this period, this is maybe you charge another 30%, right? During the construction period, then this another period 30%, and another period 10%. So you must be able to give that what we call cost profiling. But that will also depend on how you can draw from the reserve. So you must be able to state, oh, yes, this is the total amount that we go straight into that. As I said, sometimes you can be it can be well detailed. It's not it is always well detailed. So this one is just for presentation sake. That's why we decide to just concise it like this. So equipment, oh, maybe the first during the construction period, the first 6 months we are really not getting the equipment. Is when we set up the plant. Then that is when the equipment will now start coming in. So which means you expect that percent to be lower during the earlier construction stage. So maybe in the first month, maybe nothing because the factory is still in process, right? The second one, maybe nothing again. Then the next time, maybe you're saying, oh, then 40% of equipment will come in during this period, right? And the other 60% will come in this period. So you must include those timing, your cost profiling in the project can be well detailed. Engineering and sites, as they are building, as well, maybe the agreement is, oh, we pay you in this phase, or oh, we pay you once you are done with your project. As I said, a lot of agreements, and all those agreements, all those contracts must also be built into the model. Other professional services, you list that. Now, once you're able to list all the costs, all the professional fee, all the financing charges, and the whole thing, then you now state how do you plan to even fund this project. So 70% or 80% will be coming from debt, and equity will be 30%. Now, that debt of 70% can be shared with different financier. At times, they could even put it in tranches, right? Maybe based on how we've done our cost profiling, Institute A or tranche A finance first phase of the cost. Then the second financial of the second one, as I said, it's very capital intensive. For example, this is more like 2 billion. Maybe another financing institute will also come into play, then they will fund the phase two. Another one will come in. So you could have different debt tranches, different debt financier. That's why we usually have what we call cash flow. So that you need to rank who I pay first, who gets paid next, who gets paid next. We have excess cash. Can we settle this guy? Can we settle this guy? Can we settle this guy? Because all the cash are based on the project itself. So you could also have equity investors, different investors. That's one good thing about project finance. Have multiple and funding of the project, right? And you have this. And you now need to also recognize your cost of debt. Now, one important thing when it comes to the cost management is what we also call moratorium period, especially on the part of financing. So here they are telling us our loan period will be for what? 8 years. Interest rate of 6%. Moratorium period of 24. At times we also call it a grace period. So which means this time you are not going to be paying any interest or principal. And at times it also depends on the agreement. So which means you will be calculating the interest and the principal repayments as if you are paying it, but you are not paying it. So they will capitalize those interests during that period and be adding it to the principal. At times, if your construction period will take you 2 years, if you decide to give you moratorium of 2 years, but at times they usually request for more time so that the project can kickstart itself, establish itself before they start repaying those funds. For example, look at this. Our construction period was set at 12 months. We were saying, oh, give us a moratorium period of additional 1 year plus the construction. So which makes it a 24 months. So which means during that 24 months, we are not going to be paying any interest or principal. But it's as good as we are accruing it. It will be calculating as if you're supposed to be paying this. But you are not, because we are giving you a grace period, but the interest would be capitalized and added. By the time that comes with your moratorium period, you then start the repayment of the whole thing. Right? So you use that because that's also your project cash. Then you go to the cost profile, which is very, very important. And this is where we also consider lot of macroeconomic assumption, right? Because the cost is one thing that affects a typical infrastructure project. Cost is very, very important. As a modeler, as a project finance modeler, you always need to be very, very careful and also be able to state those macroeconomic effects very, very well. Now, cost inflation is one important thing. You say, oh, today you are telling us that, oh, I'll be spending, let's say, 10 million every month, every month, every month, every month, every month, every month for the next 10 years. Let's even assume keeping constant. So, which means supposed to be spending 10 million every year for the next 10 years of life. What 10 million can buy this year? You might not be able to buy it in the next 5 years, which means it might cost you more. Which means it might cost us more. 10 million, what 10 million can buy this year, in the next 2 years, it might cost us more. So, which means those kind of things we need to factor it into the model. I'm saying, oh, I'm expecting 10,000 in the next 2 years, but because of the effect of inflation, right, that 10 million might be reduced to 8 or 7 million. So those are the things that need to be factored into the model. There are different approach that when it comes to building costs into the model and the macroeconomic factor. We have what we call nominal, we have the real inflation, right? We have the conservative, we have the aggressive one as well. And everything must be factored in. And you go ahead, build different scenario, right? Build different cases. That, oh, what if our costs are increasing by this rate on best case, on worst case? So you need to also be able to factor that and create different switches to allow your users to be able to select. So yes, you've stated that you'll be spending 5 million every month, every month. But what is the effect of the whole thing? So you need to be able to state that your pricing as well. Oh, if I'm selling something at this amount, right? If inflation is increased, yeah, the effect of increase in my pricing might not be the same, but you also need to also consider that, right? And your quantity forecast, you list all your product pricing. So it's as good as a normal, as I said, it's just a project operating on its own. All the staff, all the necessary operational expenses must be well detailed. Then after you've done with this, you now go ahead and build out your calculation. And for the calculation, at times the calculation can be so much. So you can see, just that's why I have to zoom down for us to see. So you can see it can be so long. Because everything must be well stated clearly. And you must consider all factors over the lifetime of the project. You can see this is the calculation part. Then we have the monthly output as well, and we have the yearly output. So this is a very good example of the yearly output, right? As I said, you can see that everything just seems at times. You can have a project that will be for 20 years, 50 years. You want to see the projection of the 50 years, what will be the expected thing. So you can see as well, we said they were going to give us a 12-month a 12 months, which will be the construction period. So which means there's no revenue coming in here. And all you can see here is just cost, 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 cost. Then in year two, that's when the project will now start generating inflow. Your model, the output must also show the same thing. And after you are done with that, you now go straight to your analysis part. And one of the key metrics that we use in evaluating a project is your net present value, which consider the expected cash flow from the project, and we discount it in what to pay, and we deduct the initial capital investment. Consider that, right? And they want to show that, oh, is it positive? That means yes, the project is worthwhile, because that's more like profit in form of cash. But you get the initial commitment. Then your internal rate of return is more like the return on investment, which is always expected to be greater than your cost of getting that financing. Most important one is what we also call our payback period. How long will it take the project to be able to do what? To be able to get to be able to get a cash that will be equal to the initial capital outlay. And we have the debt service coverage ratio. You just kind of measure, right, how well the project can meet up its financial obligation. So here you can see the financial obligation. We have our total debt. Scroll down. We have our debt service, right? You have your interest expense, you have your principal repayments. Then you scroll down here, look at the cash expected from the project, and then we ascertain the project DSCR. So you always have a threshold. So maybe your DSCR must be minimum of 1.5% across the project line. So which means once your project is below that, is either you try to arrange for a funding during that period to be able to meet up that obligation. If not, it should not be accepted, right? And that is more like the approach that we use when it comes to rebuilding infrastructure models. So I know we have a limited time, right? We have much time to cover a lot as we ought to. So this is one thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to do for us. I have a YouTube channel, right? Where I kind of do some recording of videos on financial modeling, and I think we started one while ago. Let me see if I can show up that, and then you can take the time in case you want to take a step further into knowing financial modeling, especially project finance for infrastructure. So, based on my time, I think I've done justice to the time as well. So, my Oga over there, I hope you can hear me, and I think we can stop here. So I will share the link with them so that they can also share that with everyone. This document as well will also be shared with us so that we can take our time, go through it, and if you want to learn more about infrastructure or project modeling, then can always get to learn that on our own. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. If you have any question or need clarification, you can always drop that in the chat box and I will address it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your patience. Technical issues, we've had so many challenges. Some are beyond our control. However, we want to apologize and take responsibility for the issues we've had today. I want to assure you that the next program will run seamlessly. He spoke about financial modeling, where he said it's the process of evaluating the financial performance of the project or business by taking into account all relevant factors, growth and risk assumptions, as well as interpreting their impact. Now, because we are really hard pressed for time, we'll take questions. If you have any questions, please you indicate. Let's use the phone. Let him leave it so that you'll be hearing it. If you have any questions, please. No. Okay. Well, we will make the recording of this session available in the best time possible. As at that time, if you have a question, maybe you can throw it on the various platforms that we have, whichever one you belong to, we'll communicate to the presenter, and then we'll have your answers written. I think that's the way we should go. Except if there's any question right now. You have a question. Okay, join it. You have a question for our last presenter. Yes, it's still on.
Yes, I'm still on.
All right. Speak.
Yes, I did. Thank you for that. So let me show you that. Also, this our calculation. Yeah. So yes, this is under our finance. Oh, can you hear me? Alright. So okay. So let me address that. Let me address the question. Let me just address the question. All right. So he mentioned he was asking that yes, that there will be a moratorium period, also known as grace period, right? And what that is simply saying is during that period, you are not going to be paying interest. You're not just that it's as good as you are not paying any, but the schedule will be calculating as if you are paying. Now, if you take a look at this, so we said don't accrue during this period. So let's take a look at this. So which means in this month, you're able to withdraw like 374 million in form of debt. So which means you already have a loan in your debts in your already. Take a look at this. Model will calculate the interest as if you are paying it. Calculate that interest and be accruing it. So another month, you withdraw from the reserve account, you're able to get another 374 million, right? You see that your debt has now increased. You are not paying anything, but the schedule is already calculated until you are done withdrawing everything from the project. Now, by the end, you have close to 1.8 billion that you. Now, during that period, interest was also calculating automatically as if you are doing what you are paying it. Now, this interest will now be capitalized, call it interest during construction, and now be added to the initial principal investment. So, for example, we're saying, hey, we are getting the total amount we've withdrawn is 1.8. And from our accrued interest, we've been able to accrue during that period, we are not paying anything. But interest was calculating. We've accrued 1.58 million. So by the time they will start paying, the interest during that construction period, during that moratorium period that has been accrued, will now be added to the initial total debt funding. That increase is going to do what? It's going to increase the financing obligation. And by the time you now start paying, you now be paying 1.97 billion. Instead of you paying the 1.8, because the interest has been accrued and capitalized and added. And by the time you now start paying, you'll be paying the whole actual amounts and the interest that was accrued during that your moratorium period. So that's it. So any other question? Any other question? Okay. Rephrase it again. Can you rephrase the question again? Mm-hmm. A very good question. A very good question, and I love that. Right? So But apart from project finance, this also applies to a typical corporate business operation. Where I say, hey, please, I want to take a loan, but the company, okay, we are going to give you a moratorium period for this period, and that period is just for you to be able to allow the business to accumulate enough cash, uh, balance, stable, before we now start paying that. Now, as you mentioned, how do we get to balance that in the balance sheet? Because definitely your balance sheet will not balance because the interest is being accrued during that period. Now, your cost will only be limited to the construction period. Because after the construction period, you would have listed all your costs and everything. So after the construction period, then you don't have it to be withdrawing anything. Everything's supposed to match after that period. So that's why I say also consider some delay period and the whole thing. Now, interest is being accrued because the bank is waiting. How do you get compensate them for that? Times, just as you mentioned, you also have some. So there's always a guarantee comes in form of finances. So your interest that is being accrued, you must also include it in part of your capital expenses. So which means, as I mentioned, if my input under this financing of 0.7 million, as I mentioned earlier when I said that, project does not need just 0.51 million. So for us to know the amount that this debt actually needs, you see this accrued interest during this construction, 158 million must also be added. So that kind of gives rise to some circularity in the model and some different other things, which means that interest during that construction must be added back. Say, no, I need 5 billion. When that 5 billion is plus interest, so you calculate that interest during that construction, you now add it to it. That means, oh, I need 5 billion, and the addition of that interest during that construction will be guaranteed by another financing institute as well. So that's how it operates. That this company, the financial, they are also direct assured. So there are a lot of covenants, there are a lot of agreements that usually goes in this. So you must have added that interest during that construction, added it into it. And by the time you start your repayment is what the principal that you've withdrawn during that period plus the accrued interest. Now, the interest will now be capitalized, right? And be amortized or depreciated over the period for it to allow the balance sheet to balance. Because if you don't do that, the balance sheet will not balance. It will be capitalized, added back to the initial one, pay over the lifetime, and you capitalize it in your balance sheet. I hope I answer that.
All right, Victor. Later.
Okay. All right. So thank you. In case we have any other question, we can always send that up, and we always address that as well.
Okay.
All right. So yeah,
Mute. No, these are just my invited guests.